Start recording and we'll get going. We're going to leave some time for question and answer at the end, and then we're going to have the opportunity for you to sign up for a Canvas that's actually happening in a few days with another training on Minivan, which, like I said, is the app that we use to Canvas. So getting started, like I said, in the chat, you've dropped your name, your pronouns, if you've canvassed before. So what is your go-to coffee shop order? If you have something that you order all the time, if it's tea, you can share. Of course, you can share that too, but drop it into the chat. Let us know if you're more of an iced coffee person, if there's a specific kind of latte that you like. What is the thing that you get all the time? I actually will go and there's a coffee place in East Islip called My Town Cafe, and they have something called a Biscoff latte, an iced Biscoff latte, which is amazing. So I've been getting that a lot. We have iced espresso, Earl Grey tea, iced matcha. I love it. That's one thing I will tell you to do before you go canvassing. Definitely have something to drink on you. Water is the best option. But if you need to be caffeinated before you get out there, that's always something to think about before you head out to knock on doors. So the objectives for our training today, by the end of the session, we want you to be able to feel more comfortable, confident, and ready to talk to voters. And as a part of getting ready, you're going to create your opening line when you're talking to a voter using that Canvas script. And I'm volunteering for this candidate and the reason why statement when you're talking to undecided voters, because a lot of times people don't even know that your candidate is running. It sounds crazy to say that, but a lot of times people won't know that somebody is running for office or that there was an election for it. It's really, especially with local races, which is what we're doing. So that's really important. But it is a little bit daunting to get to a door and have them say that they don't even realize that that there's an election. And then, of course, we're going to sign up for that upcoming canvas. So why is canvassing so important? Most studies have found that door-to-door canvassing increases voter turnout by an average of 6 to 9 percentage points. That means we're getting people out to the polls who normally wouldn't have gone to the polls at all. It can boost a candidate's specific vote margin by 3 to 6 percentage points in a two-candidate race. So in the primaries, when we have multiple people running, it's great to have people get out and vote. Maybe they'll get like a 1%, 1.5% bump for a particular candidate. But when we're in a head-to-head, when it's, Republican versus Democrat, that sort of thing in a general election, it can increase the turnout for that specific candidate. It'll increase their margin 3 to 6 percentage points, even 3 percentage points, 2 percentage points, sometimes will be the difference in a lot of races, especially local races. Super important to get people out and to get information to them about the candidates that are available for them to vote for, because that's where we win. We win our elections in the margins, especially in an area like Islip, where we have more Democratic voters registered than we do Republicans, but for some reason, they don't come out and vote. And a lot of times it's just getting them the knowledge about who's out there for them to vote for, why it's important for them to vote, and just the basic information of when and where they're going to be doing that. It also creates connections between neighbors and community members. It can help people like me when I started canvassing. I thought that there weren't that many Democrats in my area. And when I was handed a list of people to contact for a local school board race, I am not alone in my area. I am surrounded by like-minded people, and it gives you a feeling of a sense of community in a sense that you are not, a little blue dot floating in a big red sea. And that's super important for us. So I'm going to play a quick video. It's from Vote Save America. We did this training called Organize or Else. And it was a training series that helped people to become more comfortable with actually taking action beyond what they might have done in the past. So I'm going to play this quick video and then we will move on from there. Let me know if we can hear it.
Okay, so we're rounding out our time together, unfortunately, but you'll have plenty of tips, I'm sure. Nancy, do you have any final tips that you want to share for folks that are joining us today?
I have way more than I have time for, but I am going
Totally.
to share this one tip. And I want everybody to hear to think of their goal when they're phone banking or canvassing, not to get votes, which obviously we want, but just like Lauren said, to make a connection. I want you to think of your goal as making the voter feel good. And there are three pretty reliable ways to do this. We already talked about one with hooking the voter. There's asking questions, getting curious. A second one is empathy. And you'll find your natural way of doing this, like saying like, oh, that must be hard, or I get that. A line that I tend to say a lot is, oh, I totally know what you mean. That rolls off the tongue for me. A third one is actually compliments. When you compliment people, they feel really warm and fuzzy, they feel appreciated, and you'll be surprised. Like when people tell you a bit about themselves, you'll find something to compliment. Like I was talking with this voter who was really stressed out. Her husband was away a lot. She worked more than 40 hours. She had to get her two kids to and from school and daycare. And so I just told her, like, I'm really impressed with everything you have on your plate, you know, everything you're juggling, how you're doing it so well, and you're showing up for your kids. And so with these three things, the questions, the empathy, the compliments, the key is they have to be real. You need to actually feel curious and actually feel kind and warm-hearted toward the voter. So before you hop on the dialer, just take a few minutes and get into the voter conversation zone. And you think about the people you're going to meet, set your intention that they're going to feel better after they talk to you than they felt before. And so this takes the pressure off you. You don't have to worry about getting their votes. You feel good, that flows to the voter. And P.S., if they have a delightful conversation with somebody who is asking them to vote for Democrats, they are more likely to show up to the polls and vote for Democrats.
Okay, so a lot of what you learn there. And by the way, she is one of the greatest canvassers and phone bakers I have ever worked with. I absolutely learned a ton from her. But that is a hugely important thing because, especially when we just need turnout, when we just need people to go to the polls in order to get Democrats elected, and it hasn't been happening, those three things, just having that really good conversation, that good feeling at the door, that good experience, it could be the difference between winning an election and not winning an election. And it's just based on the feeling that you get. And there's that old saying, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that can be applied to canvassing because you are there to give them the opportunity to make their community better, to make their own lives better. And it should be a positive, really good exchange. So we're going to think of one specific thing that you would do to build a mini relationship with a voter. Are you really good at being empathetic about somebody else's, you know, issues that they might have or things that they might need to be improved as far as maybe the town permitting system is really bad. Maybe the county, they want the sewer system put into place to protect the bay. What issues do they have that you can maybe build empathy with? Um, Cues to let the voter you know that you're listening. One of the best things that you can do is repeat back to the voter what they've said to you, just to kind of affirm what you're hearing. You can say, so I think what I'm hearing from you is that you're concerned that the federal government is overreaching at this point, or you're concerned because you have a trans family member and the legislation that's going through all around these different states is really scary, or I'm thinking that what you're trying to say is that you're really super concerned that women's health is being attacked and you're afraid for your daughter's future as far as getting medical care that's needed. When you reiterate what their concerns to them at the door, it kind of opens it up for them to expand on that. And you can always just say, can you tell me more about that concern? That's really, I haven't thought of it that way before. Can you tell me a little more about why specifically that's a huge concern for you? Because then you might get them to open up about the background of why that particular issue is really important. And once you know that, sometimes you can tie a candidate's platform positions into it because maybe there's a similar situation or a reason why the candidate has felt that this is really important to them and it's something they want to focus on. And then, of course, there's giving compliments. Like she said, you with everything going on, I'm really impressed that you're showing up for your kids. So drop a couple of ideas into the chat. Tell us what you're good at. Are you good at empathy? Are you really good at listening and making sure that you're responding to people in conversations, just even in everyday life? Or are you super good at giving compliments? I'll give you an example while everybody's writing. Let's see what we come up with. Um, One of the ways that I'm able to empathize with people is definitely about women's health care. Okay, we've got a good listener. Helen's a good listener. Kathy's good with empathy. I usually, when people talk about women's health, access to women's health care, I talk about my experience with my first pregnancy. I had a miscarriage and it wasn't resolving itself. So I had to go and get a DNC, which is like the same thing as getting an abortion. But if I had all these restrictive laws in place, there's the possibility that I would have had to be almost septic before I was helped. And because I was able to access that health care, because I was able to have my doctor make the decisions for me instead of people who had no medical training, I was able to have two beautiful little girls that are now 15 and 9 years old. The effect that it has, not just on somebody who is having an abortion for whatever purpose they decide it's for, some people need that to be medically available. And once you start pulling at one thread, it affects a lot of others. So when you give that kind of personal story and tie it into why you're concerned, sometimes they open up and tell you about their experiences, and you'd be surprised about how many women have had that similar experience. So at the door, I had a conversation with somebody whose wife had that experience when they were in their 60s, and they had had a similar experience when they were a young couple just starting out and having their family. So it kind of softened that little edge of like, we don't really know each other that well. Once you open up, make yourself a little bit vulnerable, they tend to open up too, and it really can make the conversation flow a little bit better. And Josie said they're a good listener also. That's great. So the whole idea is to make the voters the hero of the story. So people are rarely truly listened to. A lot of us will sit there and have a conversation and say, we're preparing the next thing we're going to say in response to what they're saying as they're saying it. And that can be a really bad habit for a lot of us. I know that I'm guilty of it a lot of times too. Um, so this is a place where you can flex that listening muscle and practice, active listening. You're going to cultivate a stance of curiosity. Everyone has something that worries them, especially right now. I could probably think of like 10 things off the top of my head that worry me right now. There's got to be something, even if somebody doesn't agree with you politically, there's a worry that you both share. And sometimes all you need to do is find that, and it creates that bridge. If you get into that conversation, you're going to listen 80% of the time, talk 20% of the time. So this is their moment. This is their moment to tell you what concerns them. One of the best questions I've ever asked anyone was, if you were a congressperson, if you were a county executive, what's the first thing you would fix? What's the first thing that you would tackle? What's the first problem that comes to mind, the thing that is most important that you would immediately tackle? So, and while they're talking, it sounds really silly to say this, but make affirming noises as you listen. Like, okay, all right, I hear you. Absolutely. So that they understand that you're engaged. Now, you really have to listen. It's good to make the noises, but you really should be listening as you do it. Follow-up questions are super important. That also reaffirms that you heard them, and it gives them the opportunity, like saying, okay, so I understand, what you mean about women's health care. Can you kind of expand on that? Was there an experience you had or a family member had that brought you to, being concerned about that? Let them talk, get as comfortable as they can. And you need to be comfortable with silence. Sometimes if you ask a question or they start to tell you what they're concerned about, if you leave a little bit of silence in there, it kind of will prompt them to break that silence because it gets a little bit awkward for people. And so they'll be more likely to move forward with the why of their concern if you don't jump in and, start talking with them right away. Let the voters know early that you are a volunteer. This actually goes for anything that you're doing: canvassing, phone banking, if you're just in an event where you're helping out at, say, a campaign event where you're welcoming people in, make sure that they know that you are a volunteer because it changes the dynamic. Sometimes people react differently when they think you're a paid campaign staff member than a volunteer because volunteers are giving up their time. You're giving up what little time you have to walk around the neighborhood and talk to neighbors you have never even seen maybe out of their stoop or at their garage or pulling out of their driveway. You guys have never had any interactions before, but you're taking a couple of hours out of your Saturday or your Wednesday or Thursday night to walk around and tell people about this candidate. So that speaks of urgency, it speaks of a passion, and you have a reason for being there. So being a volunteer will change the dynamic of the conversation. Make sure that they know that. So let's take a look at what we would call a one pager for a candidate. This is Dante Pittman, was running for the North Carolina State House in a recent election. The one pager, if it's done the right way, should have information about their policy stances right up front. So you can see what they believe in, what they think is most important. And then underneath that, you'll see that he is a lifelong resident of Wilson County, North Carolina, proud product of his home state's public school system. A big deal, especially if you're talking to teachers. So it gives the background for Dante as a person. Then there's information about the district. So let's say you live in District 2, but you go to District 1 to canvass and help out there. There should be a little bit of information about the district and what it's like and what the major issues there and top talking points you would have for things that are directly related to that district, what the concerns seem to be for those residents. And then it should give you talking points that the campaign specifically wants you to hit on. Like here it says he has ties to Wilson County that go back generations, that he serves on a variety of local nonprofit and public service boards, and he currently serves as captain in the North Carolina National Guard and works locally at Barton College. All stuff that people would want to know about a candidate. Like who is he? What's his background? Where is he from? What does he believe in? His key issues are listed underneath: education, healthcare, and economy. And then this, which I thought was fantastic, gives you voter motivation. Why should Democrats be voting for Dante? Why should anyone be voting for Dante? So they were trying to break that supermajority in the NC legislature, and why the opponent is so dangerous to be let have power in North Carolina in their state house, and then some endorsements underneath. So when you get this information about the person you're going to be canvassing for, that you're working on the campaign, it's really good to read over these one pagers. They will give you a plethora of information. Take them with you when you're canvassing. You can pop them in your pocket, or I usually have like some kind of shoulder bag or fanny pack or something that I'm canvassing with, and I'll stick the information about the candidate into that if you don't have like everything you need on the palm card. But it's always good to take a look at this and make sure that if somebody asks you a question, you're like, oh, I saw that. Hold on. I know that. Let me look at his education information because I know that, he was a student in the public school system, but education is a big deal for him. And then you can pull out the info. Nobody expects you to know everything. Campaign volunteer does not equal campaign expert. It does not equal candidate expert. You can always direct people with the little cards that we're handing out and, giving out at the door with information. There will be contact information for the campaign. Encourage people to email, to go to the website for the candidate, because you're not supposed to know everything about the candidate. You're supposed to have found a candidate who fits with your values because of these three issues, or even just the one issue that's really important to you that they've stressed in their campaign. This is why I'm supporting them. When somebody else needs to know why they should support them, if you don't hit on those key issues or your issue isn't the same as theirs, you can always offer the website and the actual email, it will be there for the campaign. They can get in touch with them. Sometimes there's a notes feature in Minivan where you can put a note when you canvass, like, this person had concerns about this issue, would love, someone from the campaign to contact them. And then the campaign knows, okay, so they're undecided, but they're interested in more info, and they will circle back maybe with a phone call so that they can kind of give them the info they need to maybe push them over into being a supporter. So we're all going to need an opening line at the door. Section one of any script is wordy. It's really big. There's a whole lot of information that they try to cram into that first section, which is supposed to be your introduction. And for anyone who's done this before, anyone who's phone banked, sometimes you have 15 to 30 seconds to convince someone to listen to you. And if you spend all of that saying, "Hi, my name is so and so, and I'm a volunteer for campaign, and he believes in this," instead of just introducing yourself and saying, "Do you know about, Greg's campaign for Congress?" You're not starting a dialogue, and sometimes you will, especially on the phone, will lose that person. Same thing at the door. We don't want to have like a very dry, very stiff, kind of scripted persona when we get there. We want to have conversations. So, as it says, repetition can be effective, but when you're at the beginning of a conversation with a voter, there are things you can skip or consolidate to expedite the process of getting to your first ask, which usually is, do you know Greg, who's running for Congress in your district? So we want to get to that as quickly as possible. So let's look at an example of a script. The one on the left is the campaign copy. The one on the right is the edited version. So it starts out the same pretty much. "Hi, my name is Erin. I'm a volunteer with Danford, Delaware. Is this Tommy?" Here's where it gets a little bit dicey. If you look, they're talking about a plan to save democracy, not only in Delaware, but across the nation. Our community is facing many challenges. We need leaders who can work tirelessly to solve these issues. That's a lot of words to explain why Dan is a good candidate, but none of it talks about why you're there at the door. So the best way to do this is to kind of consolidate it and make it so that you're saying, "Amazing. Again, I'm Erin. I'm volunteering with Danford, Delaware. I'm calling today, or I'm canvassing today because we need someone like Dan Pfeiffer in Congress who will work hard to make our community a better place to live. Can we count on your vote for Dan?" If you're at the door, you're going to say something very similar. "Hi, okay, so like I said, I'm a volunteer with Danford, Delaware, and I'm here today to talk to you about his run for Congress because he's going to make our community a better place to live. Can we count on your vote for Dan? Have you heard of his campaign?" And that opens up your conversation. Way quicker, by the way, than the campaign script. Next, you could be running into an undecided voter. So after the voter responds to the first ask with, "I don't know yet," or "I don't know them," you can ask a probing question. "Well, can I ask you what's on your mind when it comes to this election? Or is there any kind of concern that you have that you feel hasn't been addressed by, our current congressman, our current Suffolk County executive, whatever we're, campaigning for?" Then you can follow up with what they call a three-part response. A reference provided talking point. You can touch on your personal story related to that talking point, and then you pivot back to the initial ask. So, like, for instance, my story from before, you have a talking point. In this case, Dan really believes in protecting women's healthcare access. And the reason why that's important to me is because I needed that kind of healthcare access. And I have two daughters now that I want to have the same kind of healthcare. I don't want to have to worry about them, having to be close enough to death to get that health care. I want that to be readily available to them. And so Dan is the person that I feel is going to protect that right for me, for my daughters, for your, daughters, your sisters, your mom. And then you pivot back to the initial ask. I'm not sure if that's important to you as an issue, but if it is, is that something, how do you feel about Dan as a candidate? Do you think you could support him? If it's not their issue, you can always again ask them, "Well, what is an issue that's important to you?" And then see if you can figure out a talking point that works for that candidate and then pivot back to that initial ask. So you might do it a couple of times before you kind of get to the point where they're considering voting for the candidate or they're actually just out and out saying, "Yes, I'm definitely going to support them." So the undecided conversation is here. Again, the opening line, everything is up top. And the section at the bottom says, if they're unsure. So you say, "What's on your mind when it comes to this election?" That's where you're going to be listening and affirming that, "I hear you. That's definitely a concern for me. In case it's helpful for making your decision, here's why I'm personally supporting Dan. I know he's a strong advocate for working families. He's committed to creating thousands of good paying jobs for our community. As someone who's often struggled to find a job while still making sure my kids get to school on time, I'm voting for the person who has a record of caring about workers." And then there's that ask. Now that you know he's on the people's side, I'm wondering if that helped you make your decision. Can he count on your vote? It doesn't actually have to be this formal. It can be more conversational. It's probably better if it is more conversational, but that just gives you an idea of what a conversation with someone who's undecided is. So, canvassing essentials, you need your cell phone and a charger. If you don't have a cell phone, they will be able to, sometimes they're able to print out canvassing lists for you. We do that for when we go petitioning, we have our paper printout. We had some on minivan this year, which was awesome. But a lot of times you can also find a way to do it with a clipboard and pen, old-fashioned way, never hurt anybody. But make sure you're turning those in when you're done canvassing so that we can get the results of it. Wear a hat, not sunglasses. This is a huge one that doesn't sound like it would be important, but if they can't see your eyes, it's a thing where, there's a level of trust that isn't there if you can't see someone's eyes while they're talking. It just makes it a better connection. And it does get rather sunny out there in the summer, especially when you are canvassing. So a hat is also good just to protect your face from the sun, but it'll give you the ability for them to still see your smile and make that smile come all the way through your eyes. They know that you're sincere, and sunglasses tend to block that. Water. I have forgotten water when I'm canvassing more times than I can count. Make sure that you're taking water because it can get really hot out there, especially you'd think September would be a little bit cooler. It is definitely not. And we are out there hitting doors in September um, more often than not. And there are evening canvases, that's true, but a lot of them tend to be on the weekend because people tend to be home on the weekend and available to talk to. So we do a lot of canvassing, and it's usually late morning, early afternoon, definitely hot outside. So make sure that you are bringing water with you. And also, speaking to that, sunscreen. Nobody wants to put in all that effort just to be bright red the next day and in pain. So make sure that you're bringing sunscreen with you. Um, Pen and clipboard, if you're out there petitioning, you got to have your pen and clipboard so that you can write down all the information and also so people can sign the petitions. But that also speaks to if you don't have the ability on your cell phone to put a minivan on your cell phone, you're going to want to be able to use the pen and clipboard so that when we give you your paper list of people to kind of knock on doors for, you can write down the result of it as well. And as Dory is showing us, you need your canvas buddy. So I always recommend going out canvassing with somebody else, not just you. It's really, really good to have a buddy to go with you. Um, because it helps make you feel a little bit more comfortable. Honestly, sometimes I feel like at the door it helps someone feel a little bit more comfortable. I don't know what makes it a little more official that there's two canvassers instead of one, but it just kind of looks a little bit more official when we use the buddy system sometimes for people, sets them at ease. Definitely sets you at ease if you are new to canvassing. You should have an experienced canvas buddy so that you can watch them work and then start trying it out for yourself as you guys go along. And also, it's always good to have someone there to hype you up while you're nervous and knocking on a door for the first time. Um, Kathy, don't worry about your glasses that change to sunglasses in the sun. A lot of times, those sunglasses aren't quite as opaque as regular, like just plain old sunglasses. So I wouldn't worry about them changing to sunglasses in the sun. I think that's just fine. Um, and Lauren shared that the go-to compliment was find something on their house or a bumper sticker on their car. Fantastic way to do that. If you see a flag well, probably right now you'll see a lot of Knicks flags outside of the house, talk about the tip-in, let them know you saw the game. It'll start a huge conversation, instant connection there. Always really good if you can find something to chat about. I have met several cats and dogs canvassing that just saying, oh my God, that's the cutest dog I've ever seen, will start a really good conversation and set them at ease. But yes, I always like to say, make sure you have your Canvas buddy. So this is going to be the Q&A time for us right now. What I'm going to ask is that you write stack in the chat if you have any questions so that I can keep track of who's asking. If you'd rather stay muted and just have me answer the question, you can type it straight out in the chat. And then I'll read it out and answer it there. But if you have a question and you'd like to come off mute, just go ahead and put stack in the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. So you can go ahead and if you'd like to ask any questions, I know that we have a lot of experienced canvassers. Maybe if somebody wants to come off and give a tip that they learned from canvassing that they want to share, just drop that stack in the chat as well. We can always use more tips. A lot of it, I will say, you're going to learn as you go. You will figure out what you're comfortable doing, what you're comfortable saying as you go along. You will also figure out how comfortable you are talking to other people and what works best for you. Kathy, you said you raised your hand. Do you have something that you'd like to share?
A question. I see how valuable it is to do this active listening thing and really have a conversation about an issue. But and I think I've got a glimmer of how you go from, hi, my name's Kathy. I'm a volunteer for whoever and who's running for such and such an office. And how do you go from that to what's bothering you?
Okay. So that's an excellent question. So you say, are you familiar with their campaign? A lot of the times they will say no. So you can say, well, I'm, out here campaigning for them because they are running for, New York one seat, the congressional seat in District 1. And the reason why I'm out here is because I know that they will support childcare for all and this, that, whatever your issue is. And then you say, what is the most important issue for you right now? What are you finding that, you'd change? That's a good question to ask is the reason why I'm out here is because they support Medicare for all, because medical bills have been really a difficult thing for me. I don't know if that's, something that you're worried about, if you've had any experience with that, but their plan is XYZ. And so I want to come out here and tell everybody, about what a great candidate they are. If you were running, what would be your first thing that you would fix? Since this is, this is what I would fix. What would you fix? And then that kind of rolls you into maybe they're not worried about Medicare for all. Maybe they're, worried about inflation or gas prices or the fact that we we started a war unilaterally without congressional permission. There's a ton of stuff that could be important for people, veterans benefits and healthcare issues. So if you say this is what's important to me and this is why I'm here, um, that's why I think you should vote for them. If you were to, come out and canvass, what would be the reason? What would get you out talking to your neighbors is another good question. I felt really strongly about this, and so I felt like I had to volunteer to come talk to my neighbors. But, if it were you, what would be so important that would, get you out here talking to your neighbors about a candidate? And that's another way to kind of roll into that and get that conversation going. Sometimes it's a shorter conversation. Sometimes they're like, well, this is my concern. How do they feel about that? You tell them how they feel, and they're like, okay, that's great. I'll take their info. It's a very short conversation. But sometimes when you ask, especially the question, if you were in Congress, what would be the first thing that you would tackle? What do you think really needs to be fixed? And I've heard everything from environmental issues, women's health care, to money out of politics, um, people who really want them to stop trading stocks. That was like their number one issue because the conflict of interest was a huge problem for them. You would be so surprised at how it runs the gamut of issues. I see Lauren had a stack. Lauren, you want to come off mute and
Yeah. No, hi. Sorry, I don't know why my camera is just not working, but I just wanted to share that sometimes like you might have like you might I've walked turfs where like only one person has opened the door and you just have just like a really slow day. And sometimes that can be super discouraging, but I just wanted to say that you shouldn't feel discouraged and that sometimes, especially now that like I've walked with volunteers and I haven't even and we didn't and I didn't even get to show them like how to have a conversation because everyone is either, like closed the door in our face or they didn't want to talk to us or, they didn't open the door and that can be hard, but just know that like what you're doing is so valuable and that when you do have that one but you've also had people like they literally come out of their house and they will give you a hug because they're so glad that someone is out there, you know, helping and still working. So just know that like even if you have like a slow like even if you're walking a turf and it's like, oh, I only, talked to one person, or I only, I really mostly left literature in, on doors. Like no matter what how little you think you did, like you did more than most people. So just know that like even if you have like a really, a slow turf, or, a turf that you only spoke to, maybe two people, or you didn't get a good reaction out of, like every single interaction is valuable information, because even if they're bad interactions, then the campaign knows don't waste time on trying to get their vote. So, so I always say like even if you got like, just two door slams in your face, okay, well that's two less people that we're spending time trying to get their votes for. So just every input is valuable input, and everything that you're doing as a volunteer is valuable, even if you don't feel it right then.
Thank you, Lauren. That is a really good reminder. I will add to that that when you leave literature there, a lot of winning elections is name recognition. It really sounds terrible that, a lot of people just see, oh, that's the name, that's the Democrat, that's who I'm voting for. Same thing for Republicans. They don't look into the candidate sometimes. They just know that they're voting for the Democrat and they need to know the name. So
Yeah,
if you
sorry,
put
just
that
to
out
add
there,
on that, like something that we learned on the Avalon campaign, that your goal when you're leaving that door, your goal is not like your goal is number one, name recognition and face recognition. You just want them to match that that name goes with that face. Like that is quite literally your first goal of your conversation. Like it's not like all the other information that's just fluff and bonus. Like you really, the point you're driving home is that this is my person that I'm canvassing for, and this is what they look like. That is quite possibly the most valuable takeaway.
a lot of times too, the reason why that happens is because if somebody felt strongly enough to knock on a stranger's door and tell them, I'm here volunteering my time. I really believe in this person. Here's their info card. It gives their name, it gives their picture, and it gives information about them. Sometimes that's all somebody needs. You also have to remember that if you're walking in your neighborhood and your neighbors are seeing you do this, you are what we call a trusted source of information. So people that know you socially, even if it's just as an acquaintance, you're going to be a trusted messenger for them. They will know. A lot of us here are definitely what people would call over involved. We are extra aware of politics and the things that go with it, especially local politics. So our friends, family members, coworkers, acquaintances, a lot of the time they know that we are involved. Sometimes they will come to you and say, I just saw this on Instagram or Facebook. What the heck is going on? Do you know anything about this? They will come to you because they expect you to know. So if you're going through the neighborhood passing out literature for a specific candidate, they're going to take that more seriously than they would a random person, calling them on the phone or texting them. You have a lot of power and a lot of agency to make a huge difference in any election, local or national, congressional or otherwise. So always remember that the idea is to get the information out there, whether that be by putting, literature on the door. I'm going to make sure that I say never in the mailbox. Never in the mailbox, always on the door. You can stick it into the door handle, whatever you have to do to get it out there, but not in the mailbox. That is a huge no. It's against the law. Um, but at that point, even if you talk to one person, let's say 25 of us go canvassing in 1 week, and we each talk to two people. That's 50 more people that we've convinced to vote. That might be the difference. Some of the local elections that I've seen, they came down to 12 votes in certain places. I forget where there was one that came down to less than 10 votes. I forget where it was, but we were freaking out. And it's very, very common that a handful of votes makes a huge difference. So never think that a slow day of canvassing is something that is not worth it. Do you have any other questions? All right, so it says, speaking of endorsements, Does our group have a favorite candidate for comptroller? Lauren, are we in a primary for comptroller?
Yes, we are. And
Okay.
yeah, I
So,
mean,
yeah,
ISIP
in that
Dims,
situation,
we don't endorse in primaries,
no.
but yes, but I can share you a graphic that we made. It gives you all three of the names that you can look into on your own,
Mhm.
and you can find out information. They all have, websites and things like that. So it's Tom DiNapoli, Drew Washaw, and Raj Goyal. I'll put the link to that in the chat. I'll put the link to that graphic.
Yeah, we definitely don't endorse in primaries because we want that to be a kind of the voters decide, and then we'll pick up whoever earns that vote. That's who we run with as far as the general election. Um, it's just a better way of doing it because then it's really on the merits of each of the candidates, and you feel free to go and work for whoever you want to. I know that we do have a canvas coming up for one of them. I think it's Tom DiNapoli, right? Is the canvas
Yes,
that
he's the
they
only candidate that reached out to us to host something. So
Yeah. But
that
we would
is,
host for anybody
but
whenever they want us to come
but
out.
if
We will get
yeah,
you
if
out
any
there.
of the three candidates reached out to us to coordinate something, we would without a doubt want to do that. So
Yep. And if you go to our website, if you get our newsletter, you'll see opportunities for all kinds of different candidates. That'll let you know who's running. This way, you have the ability to get all that information for them. And definitely for the general elections, you can go to our website and make sure that you're signed up for our newsletter because the campaigns themselves and the candidates will send us events and send us, canvassing, phone banking, all that kind of stuff. And then you can feel free to do as much as you want. We will never discourage you for that. If we don't have any other questions, I'm going to start the
oh,
screen share.
I
Do
think
we
we
have
have
any others?
one from Helen asking if
Okay.
it's appropriate to mention who the candidate's running against,
It's okay to mention who the candidate is running against in a
especially if they're the
primary.
incumbent.
Yeah, especially if they're the incumbent. So because it'll be like, oh, I know who that is. Like he's running against them. That will be a situation where it's a good idea to say, this person is running against Andrew Garbarino. This person is running against, whoever, it is on the local level, that sort of thing. Primaries, it it depends upon the campaign, whether they focus on what their candidate has the ability to do and to change, and just to focus on the candidate themselves, or whether they say, they contrast themselves against the incumbent Democrat who's running. It depends. And that's for both sides of the aisle. They basically kind of figure it out in the primary on their own. But definitely in the general, we do mention who we're running against and why we're the better choice. That's always helpful. All right, so I'm going to share the screen again. And like I said, we're going to be giving you the opportunity to sign up to Canvas with us. This is going to happen this Saturday, June 20th. There's a Canvas launch at the SCDC headquarters in Bohemia, which is on Lakeland Avenue. So you can scan the QR codes that we have here, or I am actually I'm going to drop in the links, the mobilized links here, so that you can canvas with us. And then there's also going to be that minivan training that's going to be in person, but there will be the option for Zoom. So you can learn we'll give you a walkthrough of the minivan app so you understand kind of what it looks like, how it works, and you'll be all set to canvas after that. So that'll start at 11 a.m. And then we will go into the canvas from 12 to 3 this Saturday. All right, so I'm going to leave that up for just a second so that everybody can get a chance to either scan it or click into the chat. If you find that you have any other questions later on that you didn't think of, feel free to send us an email. We would be happy to answer them. Or if you wanted to set up a little chat time, we could always meet up for coffee somewhere. We will definitely be there to answer questions at the minivan training and also the canvassing. And after the training, I will kind of hang around for a minute so that I can make sure everybody's ready to go out on that Canvas launch. And then I have to take my daughter to Pride up in Northport. So, but I will be canvassing very, very, very soon. So you will see me out there as well. All right. So I am going to stop the share right now. And if there aren't any other questions now, thank you guys for coming and being here with us for this training. Again, like I said, if you have any other questions, any other information you need about canvassing, phone banking, or you just need somebody to kind of walk you through things the day of that canvas, we will be there to help you with that. And have a great night.